What advice might you give just to um, any young leaders or even female leaders as they're starting in their careers or maybe midway through their careers on how they can adapt and flex as people are changing roles in companies on a pretty often, a lot more often than in the past.
Yeah. So one of the things I've done, and I found it particularly, powerful and helpful, was to take advice before joining the company, understanding the company culture. And I did that actually before joining GE Healthcare. GE was, at the time was well known for having a very strong culture and a very specific one. Not everyone is fitting into GE, if you will. And very often, people are saying, once you've been a G and you've adapted to that, you've got blue blood. And it's pretty true, I have to say. But I did a lot of homework and spoke to people who had been in at G, who were still at G, to understand what is the culture, what really matters, where you can where there are things you might not be fully up to the task or up to the level, but it's going to be okay. And what are the absolutely mandatory values or prerequisite in terms of culture and performance that are important with the company. So getting some advice, getting some information from a broad from a broad array of people is really important. And because if you go alone, if you're staying alone in these changes, in this transition, it is very likely you're going to hit a wall and there's something, which is not going to go well at some point. I've always found very useful also to have some mentors and people who are, whether they're formal mentors or informal mentors, people who know you well, who are going to be able to help you see things, from a different vantage point. It's hard to look at yourself in the mirror and be fully self-aware. This is the harder thing. And I think, it's never a done deal. I don't know who knows oneself, perfectly. It's always work in progress. And you need people who are going to tell you, well, this is your typical you, or, this is how you're behaving and the way you're feeling in these circumstances and the way you're showing.